Thanks for joining us from the Ohio AgNet Voice You Know It, the News You Trust studio, sponsored by Grain Equipment Company, where innovation meets execution. I'm Dale Minyo. Powered by soy biodiesel on Thursday and Friday. Thanks to Wilmington College, the Ohio AgNet will be at the 97th Ohio FFA Convention in Columbus, and we'll bring you regular updates from there. Looking back to Earth Day, it is the perfect time to highlight the importance of protecting Ohio's lakes, rivers, and other waterways for future generations, said Governor DeWine. Also, Earth Day is more than a celebration, it's science in action, said Dr. Friedrich Bertley, President and CEO of COSI. Through our partnership with H2 Ohio, we're transforming environmental concepts into hands-on experience that makes sustainability accessible and engaging for all communities. ODA Director Brian Baldridge emphasized agriculture's essential role with water quality. Ohio's farmers continue to demonstrate their commitment to water quality. To date, more than 3,200 producers across the state have enrolled 2.2 million acres in H2 Ohio, and nearly 1 in 2 fields in western Lake Erie Basin are enrolled in the H2 Ohio program. ODNR is restoring more than 18,500 acres of wetlands and associated habitat through 203 active or completed projects. Through the Student Take Action program, ODNR provides middle and high school students and teachers with the opportunity to experience wetlands firsthand and explore careers in conservation. The Ohio EPA provides critical upgrades to water and sewer infrastructure and removes lead service lines, particularly in daycares. The agency has served more than 580,000 Ohioans through these projects. For more information, check the website h2ohio.gov. That's the letter H, the number 2, dot, spelled out, ohio.gov. Today's weather brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Here's the forecast.
Dry to start off this week in Ohio. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin with a look at that Ohio Ag weather update. We have a very active precipitation pattern developing today off to our northwest, North Dakota, South Dakota, upper Midwest, northern Great Lakes. But with that setup, we're not going to be seeing anything through the day today. Strong southwest winds well above normal temperatures. Now, we do have a frontal boundary extending out of that low that wants to sweep through likely for tomorrow. However, with the bulk of the energy staying up north in the Great Lakes, there's not a lot to work with here. So I'm going to allow for on-again, off-again light precipitation, a few scattered showers through the day Tuesday, but I don't think we see big rains. Honestly, the best chance of moisture for Tuesday could end up being in south to southwestern parts of the state, but with that front coming through, we do turn cooler. Now, behind that on Wednesday, we are looking at the front stalling near the Ohio Valley, and so that's going to provide a corridor for moisture to try and move in. I don't think anything develops on Wednesday itself, but overnight Wednesday night through Thursday and into very early Friday, that's where we see our next round of moisture coming out of the central and southern plains. I'm going to pencil in a quarter to 1 inch of rain across 100% of Ohio. It's done by mid-morning on Friday the 2nd. But it's going to be a good drink, and I think we get kicked out of the fields a bit there. Following it up is a dry period. Friday afternoon, clouds give way to sunshine. The weekend of the 3rd and 4th looks good. Moving into the next week, 5th and 6th, also looking pretty good. Honestly, we don't see a significant round of moisture trying to come in here until late next week. So in my mind, it is game on from this weekend forward in that first full week of May. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association announced support for U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins' action to protect the American cattle industry from the rising threat of New World screwworm. The U.S. spent millions of dollars to eradicate New World screwworm from our borders in the 1960s, but unfortunately, we are now facing this dangerous threat again, said NCBA President and Nebraska cattleman Buck Werbine. Screwworm is very destructive and could cost American producers millions of dollars a year if it reaches us. Americans have been investing in prevention efforts in Central America for decades, but we can't stop this without Mexico's participation. NCBA strongly supports Secretary Rollins holding Mexico to their commitments regarding screwworm eradication. NCBA President Werbine met with senior officials at the Embassy of Mexico in Washington, D.C. to press for further action on screwworm eradication. NCBA will continue this critical work to ensure we are protecting U.S. consumers and the health of America's cattle herd. Joining me is Luke Crumley, Director of Public Policy and Sustainability for Ohio Corn and Wheat. And Luke, today we're going to talk about water quality. Let me give people the website because we're going to refer to it several times, and that is h2.ohio.gov.
And what the state government did with H2 Ohio is they brought three agencies together, Ohio Department of Ag, ODNR, and the Ohio EPA, and they gave each of them a different task. And the Department of Agriculture works hand in hand with the soil and water conservation districts and farmers to help farmers identify, based off of up-to-date soil tests, what practices they could implement on their own fields. And then, here's the kicker, when they voluntarily enroll, they get some financial support to do it. What's really cool about H2 Ohio, and really kind of unique, is that as a farmer enrolls in this program, it's not an all or nothing approach. They can build it to the needs of their fields, but they also have the opportunity to stack practices. So you can adopt multiple practices on the same acreage and increase the payment you receive with no additional administrative burden from the program, which is huge, huge. So the state has recognized we need to make it administratively accessible for the people who are going to enroll. We need to make sure that there's a financial opportunity here to soften the burden of adopting these new practices, make it just a little bit easier for these growers, but above all, keep it voluntary.
And thank you, Luke Crumley from Ohio Corn and Wheat. And you can always find out more at h2.ohio.gov. An attempt by several environmental groups to push the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to tighten regulations on concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, as they're referred to, has ended as a federal appeals court denied a petition. A federal appeals court sided with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency on a lawsuit that sought stricter regulations for concentrated animal feeding operations. In February of 24, groups led by Food and Water Watch, the Centers for Biological Diversity, sued EPA for rejecting a 2017 petition to tighten regulations on CAFOs, asked the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit to review EPA's rejection of that petition. The environmental groups argued in court brief last year that the agency has the authority to revise its interpretation of the agricultural stormwater exemption, calling the agency's decision to reject the petition wholesale, arbitrary, and capricious. Although EPA declined to open a rulemaking at this moment, it did not refuse to take any action with respect to its CAFOs regulations, the court said in its ruling. In response to the petition, EPA acknowledged the serious problem of CAFOs-based waste discharges into U.S. waterways, and it decided that the most effective way to counter the problem is to further study its effluent limitations guidelines and to commission a stakeholders committee. Although current CAFO regulations limit land applications of manure, the environmental group said in a court brief that the rules exempt a large swath of land application-related discharges from regulation as agricultural stormwater. Now, many states impose more requirements on livestock operations than the federal program does. The ag groups also arguing CAFOs, whether permitted or unpermitted, must meet a zero discharge standard. In 2023, EPA announced the launch of a study of pollution generated by CAFOs after rejecting petitions from environmental groups from 2017 and 2022. Back with more after this.
Many drugs, like cocaine, methamphetamine, and non-prescription pills, are often cut with dangerous opioids like fentanyl. As a result, nearly 14 Ohioans die daily from unintentional overdoses. That's why it's important to carry naloxone, such as Narcan, a life-saving medication that blocks the effects of fentanyl and other opioids. Over the last 5 years, naloxone has saved over 83,000 lives. Help save lives and visit naloxone.ohio.gov to learn more and find free naloxone. Remember, if you see an overdose occurring, always call 911.
Think biodiesel is just another fuel? Think again. Biodiesel is Ohio innovation on the move. Clean, green, and built to keep diesel engines running strong. It's an engine booster, a soybean supporter, and an environmental champion all in one. Every gallon reduces emissions, strengthens Ohio farms, and powers your ride. Drive with purpose. Choose biodiesel. Learn how at soyohio.org. Oil futures rose to close for the week despite expectations of ample supplies due to a potential increase in output from some OPEC plus countries, coupled with trade tensions between the United States and China. Front month, New York MEX futures contract for June delivered edged up by 40 cents to $63.19 a barrel, while ICE Brent for June delivery rose 44 cents to make it $66.99. The U.S. dollar index also rose by 0.202, bringing it to 99.37. Despite oil futures closing the day with gains after a week of steep fall seen in previous sessions, the combination of abundant global supplies and weak demand are expected to put pressure on crude oil prices in the short term. Kazakhstan, which produces nearly 2% of the global crude output, was expected to continue increasing output, defying the OPEC plus position. Additionally, the contradictory and conflicting message of Chinese and U.S. governments on the issue of tariffs has increased uncertainty and dashed hopes for a near-term deal that would lower overall tariffs. However, China may still proceed with unilaterally exempting certain goods from import duties. Today's market analysis is brought to you by the Louis Dreyfus Company. Excited to be building the newest state-of-the-art soybean crush facility in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. Marketing your beans to LDC. Want more information? Call 574-566-2113. Here's Ryan Martin.
Grain markets finished mixed on Friday as we had a plethora of on-again, off-again kind of headlines that hit the marketplace. At the closeout, we saw old crop corn a couple pennies higher, new crop fractionally lower. On soybeans, we saw the old crop beans a few pennies lower and new crop fractionally higher. So kind of polar opposites. Bean meal was up, bean oil was down to finish the week. Wheat markets fractionally higher in Chicago and Kansas City, 1 to 2 lower in Minneapolis. So here's what's going on. There was a lot of headline swapping last week, and as we went through it, we started the day with Trump saying President Xi called him and the U.S. and China are in trade talks. The Trump administration then refuted that, said, no, that's not true. We're not in trade talks yet. China did exempt some goods from U.S. tariffs last week. That helped with the markets early on Friday, and China's foreign ministry said they're not familiar with that tariff exemption plan on U.S. goods. So here we go. Here's what was really interesting. China is not having any talks on tariffs. That came from the Chinese embassy, and the U.S. should stop creating confusion. It was the minute-to-minute headlines that were really doing all of the work last Friday, and that's why at the end of the day we did basically nothing. It was option expiration on Friday, so that was interesting. Usually option expiration, you gravitate toward a strike price. On this one, the 480 calls were not in play. A 480 put did get into the money just ever so slightly. On the soybeans, we gravitated toward 1050. Actually settling at 1049 3/4. So that was an interesting strike price to gravitate to on soybeans. What do we do this week? I don't know. If you look at the technical side of things, we were flirting with the 200-day moving average over the latter part of last week. With a slightly lower close, I still believe we were above the 200-day moving average. As we switch now to seeing more interest in the July soybeans, I think we're going to try and figure out whether or not there's any upside here. The trade talk is that there probably is going to need to be a little bit of an adjustment in exports on soybeans, and therefore the carryout on beans may be adjusted downward ever so slightly. We'll see. I don't think that happens anytime in the next month or two. I'm Ryan Martin.
And thanks, Ryan. Today's market's brought to you by Seed Consultants. Simply better performance online at seedconsultants.com. Overnight at the open, May corn down 2 1/4 at 476.5. December down 2 at 453 3/4. May beans down a penny and 3/4 at $10.48. November $10.32, down 3. July wheat down 2 at $5.43. September 5.57 3/4, down 1 3/4. April cattle at Friday's close up 75 cents at $214.25. May lean hogs $92.80, up 85, and August feeder cattle up $1.60 at $294.30. Thanks for joining us. This is the Ohio AgNet.